So we are going to end the year with a whole unit on budgeting. Instead of a test at the end of the budgeting unit, you're going to have a big project. So we're going to take notes and talk about things like credit cards and buying houses and renting apartments and taking out loans and all that sort of stuff in order to sort of build your knowledge base before we say, hey, go plan your budget. All right? So the next 2 or 3 weeks we'll be taking notes and doing worksheets, and then it'll end in a big project. All right? So last week we watched a movie about credit cards and credit card debt. Today we're actually going to talk about credit cards. So this is the absolute basic information on credit cards today. We'll get a little more into it tomorrow with actually calculating credit card payments and reading your credit card statement, things like that. But today is just the very, very basics. So from now till spring break, all credit cards. Any questions before we get going?
Can I get a pencil?
So your notes are the exact same as what's on the board, except there are some blanks in it. So as we're reading through it and discussing it, just fill in the information that's missing, okay? So credit cards can be a blessing or a curse. They allow us to exist in a cash-free society and buy things with money that we don't have yet. Yet this is a temptation that leads many into a dangerous amount of personal debt. Today we will learn about the pros and cons of using a credit card, the difference between a credit card and a debit card, and basic vocabulary you might hear when applying for or using a credit card. We will also discuss interest rates and making payments. So, do you guys know just in general what I just read? What does that mean in real life terms? What is a credit card? Something that you can use to do what? Pay for stuff. Yeah. So you get a little card in the mail, and you'll have something called a credit limit. And the credit limit is usually a lot higher than what you want to actually spend with the credit card. My first credit card, the credit limit was $500. Well, I was 18 years old. I did not need to go spend $500 on anything. But the credit limit, that's how much you could swipe, how much money you could spend before there would be any sort of problems, okay? Now, you don't have to have that money when you spend it. That's the big problem with credit cards, especially people that are younger that don't really have good jobs yet, don't really know what they're getting themselves into. So you can just keep buying and buying and buying until you reach that limit, and then that's when the card starts getting declined.
What if you stop buying before?
If you stop buying before that, that's a really good idea. However, you still have to pay that money off. So they'll send you a bill at the end of the month that's like, hey, you charged $300 on this credit card. And then you can choose if you want to pay the whole $300, which that's a pretty good idea. Or it'll say, well, your minimum payment right now is $20. And then you just send the minimum payment, and then they charge you interest for anything that's left over that you didn't pay. And that just rolls over to the next month. All right, so it's really easy to get out of control with the credit cards and the amount of money that's on there, especially if you're only paying that minimum payment. So that's kind of the things you want to look out for. The good thing about a credit card, and we'll kind of get into this later in the notes, but I'll just mention it now. If there's some sort of emergency situation, the credit card can be really helpful. Like if you get a flat tire and you don't have a couple $100s to buy a new tire, well, you can use your credit card and then pay it off later. So it's good to have in an emergency situation, but it's a little bit dangerous to have at the same time. So here are some terms you might hear when you're signing up for a credit card or when you're looking at your credit card statement. APR, that's a really important number to pay attention to. The APR is the annual percentage rate. This is the interest rate a bank or business charges for an entire year on a credit card or loan. The APR varies by bank or business. So it's a good idea to find a credit card with the lowest APR. APR can range from 0% to 30%. Remember, the lower, the better. So the percent, that's basically the percent that they're going to charge you just for using your credit card. So if it's 25%, everything you put on there, if you don't pay it off in the first month, you're going to pay that percent just to have the bill roll over. So The higher the APR, the more you end up owing them. So it's like the less money you have to actually spend on your own stuff because you're spending more money just to own the credit card. All right, a credit card itself is a small plastic card issued by a bank or business that allows the holder to purchase goods or services and pay for them later. Very similar to a credit card is a debit card. A debit card is issued by a bank that allows the holder to transfer money electronically from their account in order to make a purchase. So a debit card takes money that you already have out of your own bank account. So you don't have to pay off a debit card later. You already paid that money. It's already your money. You're spending your own money.
So it's safer than a credit card.
So it's safer than a credit card, yes. Yes.
And also with the debit card, you need a PIN.
Yes, yep. I think that's on here later. Yeah, so debit card, you're spending your own money. But again, if you find yourself in some sort of emergency situation, you might not have enough money in your bank account. But yeah, in general, debit cards are a lot safer. It's a lot better idea to use a debit card. All right. Debt is when you owe money. So like if you say someone's in credit card debt, that means they owe money on their credit card. Okay? Interest rate. The interest rate is the percent the bank or business charges each month for borrowing their money. For example, if an APR is 25% for the entire year, that would be 2.1% interest each month. This is the percentage used to calculate the additional money you owe the bank each month that you have a balance. So if your APR is 25%, you don't pay 25% every month. You pay 25% divided by 12 because there's 12 months in a year. So if you have, let's say, $100 balance that you didn't pay off, you'll owe $2.10 extra the next month. They charge you just that percent each month that you don't pay it off. And then over a whole year, it equals 25%. The minimum monthly payment, this is really important. The minimum monthly payment is based on your balance. The business or bank determines the minimum amount of money you can pay them each month to make progress on paying off your card. The minimum monthly payment is usually a very small amount compared to what you owe. And the bank, we saw this in the movie last week if you guys are paying attention, the bank wants you to pay the minimum monthly payment instead of the whole thing because then they get to charge you more interest and they make more money in the long run. So it'll say, and it's really tempting because it's like, oh, you only owe us $15. You can just pay us the rest later. So you're like, oh, great. I'll just pay $15 now, and then I have all this extra money in my bank account to spend on fun things. But that's how they get you because then they charge you interest on the rest of it, and then your next month is higher, and your next month is higher, and your next month is higher. There was someone on that video, too, that said if they paid the minimum monthly payment, their balance was never getting lower. Like it was charging them more in interest than they were paying in their minimum monthly payment. So they just owed more money and more money and more money. So it's tempting to only go with the minimum, but it's not a good idea. All right, and then an overdraft, that's when you're using a debit card. So again, the debit card, the money's coming out of your bank account. And if you accidentally spend more money than you have in your account, it's called an overdraft, and you'll be charged an overdraft fee. Now, my debit card, let me think about this. A lot of debit cards, they won't let you overdraft because it's all happening electronically. Like, they'll see that you don't have enough money and your card will just get declined. Sometimes, though, it doesn't catch it right away. Like, if you buy a few things, like, in a row one day and they haven't all, like, processed through the system, then you'll have an overdraft, which means you spent more money than you have, which, let's say you spend an extra $10. You still owe them $10 for overdrafting, plus you owe an overdraft fee. So they might charge you $25 just for overdrafting. So you owe the amount that you took out that was too much plus a fee on top of it. So overdrafting is another way that they just make more money and more money and more money off you. Overdrafting, I think, was a lot more common when people were writing checks because those took a lot longer to process than the debit card purchases. So if you spend more money than you have in a checking account or a debit card, that's an overdraft, and you will get charged a fee. Any questions so far? You guys following along in your notes? All right, and then, yes, you mentioned this a minute ago. A PIN number, it stands for personal identification number. A PIN number is a numeric password you must use when making a purchase or visiting an ATM. An ATM is an automated teller machine. It's where you get cash from with your debit card. So I was just at an ATM yesterday, actually. So you put your card in, and then it asks you for, sometimes it'll say your secret number or your password or your PIN number. It's usually 4 digits, and it's just to make sure if someone like steals your debit card that they can't take all your money. So it's just sort of a password that protects you a little bit, and it's called a PIN number. You can make up your own PIN number when you get the card. You just have to make sure that you don't forget, and don't tell people your PIN number. It's supposed to be a secret. All right. Yes, like a secret code. Think of it as like your password to like your email account. Like you wouldn't give that to other people. Don't give them your PIN number either. All right, so here's the difference between a credit card versus a debit card. We sort of talked about it already, but here's a little bit more information. So a debit card is issued by a bank, and it withdraws money from your checking account. So you already have the money, you already made the money, it's your money, you're spending your money. All right, a credit card is issued by a bank or business. They pay for the item, and then you pay them back later. So it's someone else's money, and you're going to owe them back. That's the difference between credit and debit. Yeah, a credit card is kind of like a loan. Yeah, you're buying it before you actually have the money, and you're just paying them back later. All right, so debit card, it's already yours. Credit card, you're going to pay later. All right, over here, debit card. Usually there are no fees for using a debit card. It's just sort of a courtesy from the bank. Makes things more convenient. You don't have to write checks. You don't have to carry a bunch of cash around. So debit cards in general are cheaper to use. You must pay interest for borrowing money from a bank or a business. So credit cards, unless you're paying it off each month, you'll end up spending more money because of those interest payments, sort of like we already talked about. Debit card, you can only spend as much money as you have in your checking account. But with a credit card, you can spend as much as your credit limit. So if you guys probably would have a whole lot less money in your bank account than the credit card company would give you as a credit limit. Because like I said, and like we saw in the movie, they want you to be in debt. They want all the money they can get from you. So they'll say, oh yeah, you can spend $2,000. It's fine. It's not fine, okay? So again, debit cards are just a little bit safer. Benefits of a debit card, you don't risk going into debt. You don't have to pay interest. Benefits of a credit card, you can spend money that you don't have yet. You can take time to pay it back. And like I said earlier, it's really good in emergency situations if you have some sort of emergency with your transportation or some sort of medical emergency. It is extra money that you can pay later, where if you only had a debit card, you might not have that advantage, okay? The limitations to having a debit card, you have to keep track of your balance. If you accidentally spend more than you have, that's called an overdraft like we talked about, you have to pay a fine. And if you run out of money, you can't spend anymore until you put more money in the bank. So those are the limitations of a debit card. Limitation of a credit card, you can spend money that you don't have, meaning that you might go into debt. There are interest charges, which means you have to pay more for an item in the long run. So definitely, I think it's a good idea to have both a debit card and a credit card, but be very careful with the credit card. My first credit card my dad got for me, and he said charge 1 tank of gas every month and pay it off right away. That way I had the credit card if there was an emergency, and I was building up my credit score, but I wasn't going into debt. I wasn't buying like a whole bunch of shoes or anything crazy. I was just sort of learning slowly how to use the credit card. And then my like fun purchases like clothes and shoes and stuff, I use my debit card for. So pros and cons to both. Any questions so far?
No.
All right, so this is what a credit card looks like. So this the bank company is usually here, the company or the bank that owns it. Your expiration date is on there. The account number is here, and then your name is here. So if you make an online purchase, it will ask you for pretty much all of this information. Any questions? All right, keep going. On the back, there's a magnetic strip. That's what's read by the computer. There's another code back here. A lot of times when you're making a purchase online, it'll ask you for this code. It's just sort of a security code. Like if someone sees the front of your card and they memorize the number somehow really quickly, it would be a lot harder for them to see both sides of the card. So that's just another way that they keep things secure. And then there's a white strip on the back that you have to sign. And when you make purchases, technically, the cashier is supposed to compare your signature when you sign your receipt to the signature on the back of your card. A lot of times it doesn't happen, but it's supposed to happen. So there you go. Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes if you don't want to sign the back of your credit card, they can ask for your driver's license.
Yeah, my mom is always weird about signing the credit card. She always thought like if it got stolen, they could just forge her signature. So she always put CID, and then she'd have to show her ID and her credit card to make a purchase. So just one more way to kind of keep yourself safe with a credit card. All right, here's the actual math coming into play. This is how we calculate monthly interest rates. So the APR divided by 12, that's how much interest you'll pay every month. So example 1 says you sign up for a credit card with an APR of 20%. What is your monthly interest rate? So you need to do 20 divided by 12. Can anyone tell me what 20 divided by 12 is? Anyone? What is it? 1.6? 1.61?
1.6 and 7, 6, 6, 6, 7, 7.
Okay, so we'll just put 1.67%. Questions? All right, the next one says a credit card company advertises APR of 10%. What would the monthly interest rate be? So now it's 10 divided by 12.
0.83.
So 0.83%. Any questions? I think you did 12 divided by 10. You got to do 10 divided by 12. We good? All right, next it talks about how to calculate interest charged. So your previous balance, so whatever you did not pay off from the last month, times your interest rate, that's how much interest they're going to charge you. Now, if you're using a calculator, there's two ways you can type it in. You can use the percent button, or you'll have to change it to a decimal. Does everyone see the percent button on their calculator?
Yeah.
So this says you have a previous balance of $76 on your credit card with a monthly interest rate of 2%. How much interest will you be charged on your bill? So you'll take the previous balance times 2%. That will be how much you pay in interest. If you don't have a percent button, you can change that to a decimal by jumping it up 2 places. And you can do it like that.
1.52.
And this is money, so $1.52. So it's an either or, one or the other. You don't have to do both. I think most of you will probably just do this. I think most calculators have that percent button. Questions? All right, and last example for today. You have a previous balance of $500 on your credit card with a monthly interest rate of 3.5%. What is the new balance after the interest is added? So what do you think?
1750 or 17.500 at the end.
So you multiplied the previous balance by the percent, and what do you get?
1750.
Now it asks what's the new balance after the interest is added. So what do you think I need to do with the 1750?
Divide. Wait, no.
So you still owe $500 from last month, and now they're charging you $17.50. So you have to add it. So your previous balance, you still owe that. Then you're adding that new amount.
$21.
So now you owe $517.50.
Where I got that.
So they charge you almost $20 just because you didn't pay them the full amount last month. So you can see if you owe them $500 plus $17.50, and if you're still spending more money, if you're still swiping the credit card to buy stuff, then that amount goes on there too. So you can see how it sort of snowballs out of control because you have your previous balance plus your interest rate plus whatever you've spent. So it just keeps building and building and building. All right, so like I said, that's kind of the bare bones of a credit card. We'll keep going deeper and deeper the rest of the week. Do you guys have any questions so far? No. Okay. Here comes your homework.